Inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our amal, of course, tonight and in the coming days. And inshallah, may we remember this beloved personality who we have lost today, our beloved Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. As we discussed yesterday, I posed the questions of how we may approach our spirituality qualitatively, that is by understanding the principles of the Qur'an and Ahlul Bayt, specifically through the revelation of the Qur'an to our beloved Prophet. We concluded yesterday that in fact, if you look historically, the a'mals and ad'iyah or supplications that we recite have been compiled at a later period, and so the du'as that we are reciting were not present in the earlier Imam's time. Naturally, as a historical fact, that Dua Makarim al-Akhlaq, Dua Tawbah would not be present in Imam Ali's time. And that led us into the discussion, well, exactly what did they teach their followers? How did they develop companions like Bilal or Ammar ibn Yasir or Kumayl ibn Ziyad? How did these companions come about? How did the prophets and Imams tap into that spiritual potential which is in all of us? It is in all of us. To say that, well, those companions were of a different period and had access to these Imams, well, that doesn't give us the answer then as to why the people of Kufa, who saw the Imam and who saw Zaynab bint Ali, peace be upon her, left Imam Hussein to down the plains of Karbala. So, yes, having somebody present, you may have access to some sense of direct knowledge, but it doesn't guarantee that one may become ethical or spiritual. So what I want to do is delve a bit deeper into this question and share with you this principle which I have been trying to research over the last year of sulukun nuzul, and I will explain that. We said in the last couple of lectures that when we want to open the Qur'an and we want to understand the Qur'an, well, we can understand the Qur'an by looking at its historical circumstances. We can look at sababun nuzul, the cause or reason of revelation. Sha'an nuzul, something broader than that, the broader context of why a verse was revealed. And the example I gave yesterday was of Salatul Layl, if you remember. That Salatul Layl was revealed to Rasulullah because he was getting that verbal and physical abuse of people at that time. People calling him names. Not only that, it was a prayer that trained Rasulullah spiritually and metaphysically to receive the later revelations of the Qur'an. Now the question that I'm posing, which is sensitive territory you could say, is exactly what was the Prophet feeling in his heart when these revelations were occurring? Because I think that is the fundamental question. What do we have to feel spiritually alive, to say that we are connected to God, for us to receive ilham, for us to receive reformation? I think this is the fundamental question. We want to know what was it that led the Prophet to receive this kind of revelation. Do you think that's a fair comment, everybody? Or do you think, no, that is not something we should ask? So I'm posing to you that, there's no response, so I don't really know what your answer was. But this is part of my research, right? Why Salatul Layl was real? Why Sutul Alaq? Why these particular verses? To guide Rasulullah in what particular manner? To guide him in particular aspects of his life? And why the 5 daily prayers should come after 10 years and 15 years? Why in Medina there were more laws as opposed to Makkah, even though that's not necessarily a correct distinction. There were also laws in Makkah. So, I'm trying to be as clear as possible. As Prophet is leading his life, his heart and soul is opening up. He's undergoing this transformational journey. and at the same time, ayat of Qur'an are revealed. So we too, aren't we going on a transformational journey? Why are we gathered here? Why are we gathered for these Amal nights? Why aren't we just at home and doing what we want? Clearly, the question of this transcendental and spiritual transformation is important to us. Would you say would you agree with that at least?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we want to understand that, don't we have to ask the same question to the Prophet? Again, there's no response. Nobody, people are used to. So sorry. Okay, yes. So okay, do you think that's a too sensitive question to ask? I'm saying, no. Okay. You know, it's like we're trying to open the heart of Rasulullah. Yes. Why can't we do that? Why can't we open the Quran and ask these questions? Right? So, I'm going to quote to you a mufassir who did try to go into these very deep questions. Because I don't want, for me as Imran, I don't want to be here and I don't want to engage in A'mal if I really don't know what I'm searching for in my heart. This is my question. Okay? You don't have to agree with that, but that's my question, right? So, I did briefly explain to you that 95% of the tafsir that we read is interpreted, or the Quran is interpreted from the way it was compiled, yes? Surah Al-Fatiha, Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah Al-Imran. Not from the order of revelation. You go into majority of Arabic bookshops, Farsi bookshops, even in English. All the tafsir starts from Surah Al-Fatiha. Yes? I don't know if I put a footnote here, but I only found 4 to 5 tafsir that started from the way the Quran was revealed. Now, one of them is from a mufassir known as Muhammad Darwaza. Muhammad Darwaza. Okay? Muhammad Darwaza was a mufassir that was imprisoned in Nablus, talking about Palestine. He wrote his tafsir while he was in prison for several years. So this scholar wrote the tafsir at a time when he was suffering. And not only when he was suffering, but he says in the muqaddimah of his tafsir that I want to do a tafsir that is going to respond to the contemporary needs of my Palestinian society and the youths of that society. Now you look today what is happening in Gaza, it's not just lives being lost, it's intellectual heritage being destroyed. You're talking about killing minds. This is the saddest thing, to be honest. And I'm quoting to you a tafsir from somebody that is imprisoned, right? Now, in his tafsir, he actually talks about what our beloved Prophet was going through when Surah Al-Alaq was coming down. And this is his actual quote from his tafsir. He says, the Prophet was immersed in God in solitude, and in the silence of most of the night, which resulted in the purity of his soul and strengthened his spirit. Especially because the Prophet used to engage in spiritual retreats before his mission. I'll stop there. Number one, please note the distinction he's making. You're talking about pre-revelation and post-revelation. Pre-revelation, the Prophet himself used to go to the cave of Hira. He used to intentionally isolate himself from society. That is the seerah of Rasulullah. Seerah meaning that the Prophet, in his own mannerisms and personality and traits and the circumstances of society, chose himself to go away to the cave of Hira regularly. That's why I posed the point yesterday that you cannot expect people to be spiritual in 3 hours in an a'mal that they don't do throughout the rest of their life. It is virtually impossible, if not impossible. And maybe psychological tests can be done to prove this. But the Prophet from history did this on a regular basis, and not 1 year before, throughout his life. This is the first point. So the first lesson is to actually isolate ourselves from society when we can, to engage in solitude with Allah. What was the purpose of this? To purify his soul and strengthen his spirit. Which means the Prophet did undergo spiritual transformation in stages. I said yesterday that our respected ulama say that any person that wants to engage in spirituality has to go through various marahil, stages, intention, ikhlas, sincerity, tawbah, all of these things the Prophet engaged in. Number three, he then bases this on various ahadith. Now these ahadith are from Siratun Nabawiyah by Ibn Hisham, one of our earliest sources on the history of our beloved Prophet, peace be upon him. This is a book, amongst other books, that all Shia and Sunnis access to understand what was the life before revelation of Qur'an. This is what we want to know, right? And he says, this is the hadith that he quotes. He says, the Prophet loved solitude. So he used to be alone in the cave of Hira and engage in what is known as devotional exercises, tahannuf. Now tahannuf, according to my humble research, I have not found a very consistent definition except for meditation, tafakkur, and the names of Allah. Maybe there are other things. Allama Tabatabai rahimahullah alayhi says that all of the prophets, regardless of the different sharia that was revealed to them, because you can't say that all prophets prayed 5 times a day and fasted in the month of Ramadan, because that type of sharia differed amongst prophets, right? We didn't have Surah Al-Fatiha when Prophet Musa alayhi salam was there, yes? But what he does say that arguably all prophets did prostration. They did prostration or they raised their hands in dua, because salah, even the word salah has changed. Salah meant dua, and now it is formalized to mean 5 daily prayers. But the original meaning is a kind of supplication to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we know the Prophet engaged in these kind of acts. He says, according to the hadith, that the Prophet engaged in these acts for many nights. Many nights. Now look at his conclusion, which I found very interesting, which I have not found in many tafasir. He says, these personal acts of the Prophet had an effect on his willingness to receive revelation of his Lord, and it was one of the reasons why Allah chose him for that task of revelation. Very interesting conclusion. He's basically saying that if the Prophet had not gone to the cave of Hira and engaged in these acts, maybe he would not have received revelation at the time he received it. That's his conclusion. So he's saying that the Prophet's free will and the actions enabled him to receive revelation. Because you say, well, why did the Prophet receive revelation at age 40? Why not 20 or 25 or 28? It's a fair question to ask. Why, for example, Prophet Zakaria was given a child later on in his life? Why at that time? Why Prophet Isa alayhi salam, right, is speaking when he's a baby? I mean, we said that's a mu'ajiza. But then if you look at cause and effect, right, one theory is that Bibi Maryam alayhi salam was an extremely pure lady that also received communications from angels, by the way. And there's a very interesting discussion in one of the books I have. I forget the name of the book, but there's an interesting discussion about what maqam do we give Lady Maryam? Do you put her on a prophetic status? Do you put her as this spiritual lady? How do you describe Lady Maryam exactly? Because she did receive communications from the angels, right? And she gave birth to to Prophet Isa alayhi salam. So why did Prophet Isa speak, from the cradle? Because Lady Maryam herself had reached a level of spirituality that gave birth to such a boy. And now just to push the envelope a bit further, so you say, well, why didn't our beloved Prophet speak when he was a baby? I'm giving you direct questions. Why are prophets receiving revelations at different ages? Why is the mu'jiza coming at different times? Because at each stage of Prophet's life, there is always free will. There is always decision-making power from prophets, always. Okay, Prophet's solitude led him to receive revelation in this manner. Lady Maryam's solitude led her to receive Prophet Isa alayhi salam. Prophet Zakaria, towards the end of his life, maybe through the sincerity of his dua, is then receiving Yahya alayhi salam. So the first point I want to make to you, and this is from the Seerah. Please note, there's a distinction between Seerah and Sunnah. Sunnah is the authoritative precedent, the authoritative sayings and actions and tacit approvals of the prophets and imams that we follow. It is authoritative because it is done, if you like, intentionally. It is left for the guidance of the ummah. But the seerah is the personal life, if you like, the biography of a prophet, that where we can delve deeper to see how he led his life on a personal level. I always find seerah very interesting. And before I came here, it's on YouTube, you can have a look, so maybe some of you have listened to it. I gave a lecture at Imam Ali on what was the relationship between the Prophet and Lady Khadija. And Lady Khadija, who was she even before she met the Prophet? We always look at Lady Khadija with the Prophet. Okay? Who was Lady Khadija before the Prophet? And one of the quotes that I gave in the majlis, which I'll repeat here, just to show how important seerah is, I'll try to remember it. It's from the book A'lam al-Nisa. A'lam al-Nisa fi al-Alam al-Arab wal-Islam by Ustad Umar Rida Kahal. Okay? Very nice book, and one of the few encyclopedias we have on biographies of Muslim women, not men, because a lot of the encyclopedias we have are on men. This is purely about women. And one of the quotes which astounded me is that Lady Khadija was known as At-Tahira, the pure woman, in the age of Jahiliyyah. In the age of Jahiliyyah. Which means that the mushrikeen recognized her for her moral attributes even before she met Rasulullah. Even before revelation of Qur'an. So it shows that someone like Lady Khadija can achieve a high spiritual maqam independent of revelation. Independent of revelation. Because then why would Prophet marry Lady Khadija? Doesn't make sense, right? If Lady Khadija doesn't have good akhlaq and is not attuned to what the Prophet's heart wants, then why would he marry her? She clearly achieved moral and spiritual actions prior to revelation. She was known as a tahira. It's widely reported. We teach our children tahira, right? We always teach this. Well, why was it there? And it shows, and I don't want to go off track, but it shows in our theology, in Shi'i and Mu'tazili theology, that you are able to discover morality even before revelation. You are able to do that according to Shi'i and Mu'tazili. That is there. And I'm bringing it back to show that when we are doing A'mal, when we are here today in 21st century, we too can achieve these great moral and spiritual heights. And I think we should, look, mashallah, many of you are elder than me, you can give me advice how to raise children. But we always, I feel, should push our children to reach the highest spiritual and moral positions as high as possible. Why not? Otherwise, what is this meeting of Lady Khadija and the Prophet? Otherwise, what are these sayings of Ali bin Talib that I gave yesterday about the heart? It means they want to push us that in 21st century today, we too can produce a great companion of the Prophet, or we too can follow in the footsteps of Rasulullah sallallahu. So, I'm trying to move slowly and trying to go as deeper, but inshallah carrying everybody sort of with me or with us together, okay? This conclusion tells us that the Prophet received revelation at a particular time in his life when his soul was appropriate to receive a particular guidance that he could recognize beyond this particular world. As he says, as it is reported, that says in the Qur'an, that when he saw angel Jibreel, you can see this in Surah Al-Takwir and Surah Al-Najm, that this angel Jibreel, he says, spanned the whole horizon. From east to west, he saw this light, or he saw this angel Jibreel. So when he's seeing this, and when angel Jibreel is communicating to him, and I move on to the second point, to show that spirituality is a journey, even for Rasulullah, in the earliest ahadith we have from Sirut al-Nabawiyah, when this grand angel is telling the Prophet, Iqra, you all know this, Iqra, yes, recite. But in the hadith, Iqra is repeated 3 to 4 times. Not once, 3 to 4 times. Angel Jibreel comes to the Prophet in Cave of Hira and he's saying, Iqra. What does Prophet say? Ma akra'u. According to one set of narrations. Ma akra'u means, what do I recite? According to other set of narrations from Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, it is ma ana biqari'in. And the second one means that I am not a reciter, or I am not a reader, or according to another kind of interpretation, I don't know how to recite. But I don't like the third one because it doesn't seem to make sense. Or they say, I don't know how to read. The reason I don't like it because clearly the Prophet could speak and recite Arabic. Okay? So, but that's another discussion. But I'm going with ma akra'u because that is a hadith that I have sort of referenced. Okay? When he says ma akra'u, I think it makes more sense because he says, what do I recite? Then Angel Jibreel says, Iqra again, recite. So he says, ma akra'u, what do I recite? Right? Angel Jibreel again says, Iqra. He again says, ma akra'u, what do I recite? He's saying the same thing. What do you want me to recite? Right? And then, finally, that fourth Iqra, he says, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Recite in the name of your Lord who created. Now, if you go by this methodology, right, which is tafsir bihasab al-nuzul, interpretation of Quran according to revelation, if you go by this logic, right, this repetition makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. Because the Prophet has to adjust his soul to the metaphysical abode and adjust himself to now receiving a kind of communication that is not purely physical. That is why at times, to make it easy on Rasulullah, Angel Jibreel came in the form of a man. We teach this in Madrasa, by the way, as well. Angel Jibreel came in the form of a man. And it is reported in Majmul Bayan that the easiest way that the Prophet could take in the revelation was when Angel Jibreel came in the form of a man. Because he could recognize that this was a man, and then he could memorize what was being recited to him. But when the angel came in the form of kind of dreams, or the angel came in the form of kind of wahi, if you like, that was really hard for Prophet to take. So, here, the revelation of Quran came in stages because it's directly in attune with the developing soul of Rasulullah. And I think that, for me, that's a very beautiful way to understand the journey of Rasulullah. Because it gives me solace that I have to adjust my soul in order to increase my level of spirituality, but also to receive ilham, inshallah, during these nights. Salawat. As proof, to give you directly from Quran, when I said yesterday, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ya ayyuhal muzammil, qum min layla illa qalila. O wrapped up one, stand in the night, except a little. This qalila, little, in my notes here, I have 4 to 5 different interpretations. 4 to 5. Nobody has agreed as to what does a little in the night mean. Some say it means a sixth, some say it means a tenth, some say it means a third. That is why you may have heard from pulpit or madrasa, maybe that, okay, if you want to pray Salatul Layl, pray in the last third of the night, right? But they didn't tell you the rest of the story to make it a bit easy for us, right? And then you say, I can't do Salatul Layl. But you see, this is my point, is if you don't see the different opinions, then you're not telling people, well, actually, the Prophet could have done it in other parts of the night. And the other interpretation is, pray the prayer that is easy for you. Okay? That is one proof I'm giving you. Illa qalila. The second proof I'll give you, in the interpretation of these ayat, and I found this very beautiful, this interpretation is from Ibn Arabi in his tafsir. He says, and I posed a question at the start to you, what was the Prophet going through in his heart? How can we relate to it? He has a very beautiful interpretation. He says, when Allah revealed these verses of the Qur'an to our beloved Prophet, according to his research, he says, Allah was saying, restrain your soul, wahbi nafsika, nafsaka, restrain your soul, control your soul from recklessness, ataish, and disturbance, ittirab. Remember yesterday I said we may get distracted, right? Look at what Ibn Arabi says. He's saying Allah is telling the Prophet, restrain or control your soul from recklessness and disturbance. Rather, move towards the seeking of sustenance from Allah and be attentive into what is being whispered to you. And strengthen your soul. Qawwa nafsaka. Okay? What Ibn Arabi says is very interesting, because what he's saying is that when we are going through different emotions. Now, I give personal examples. Somebody has insulted me, somebody has ostracized me, somebody, made life difficult for me. These things play in your mind from time to time. Right? Why has somebody done that? Right? Why has somebody done this to me? The Prophet had to have that level of control where even those natural emotions and worries and stresses that do plague us, he had to remove it in that instance when revelation was coming to him. And I think that is very, very difficult. Because he only had to hear words of Allah and not words coming from his own soul. So the soul talks to us, right? Imran Ali, why did you do this? Or something's happening. This constant chatter. When revelation was occurring, he removed that chatter and could only hear Iqra. That's why you say Iqra ma'akru, until the soul could adjust itself to only hear the ayah of the Qur'an that was revealed. So, if we look at interpretation of Qur'an in this way, and spirituality in this way, I'm hoping we can break it down from the life of Rasulullah, that how should we approach not only the A'mal, but spirituality in our life. That simply sitting in solitude and having a meditation exercise, right, I'm going to sit there for 2 minutes and not have any chatter in my soul. Just 2 minutes. Can we do that? It's a task. 2 minutes might seem like a very short time, but it's very difficult. And if we move from that level, then we can move at the level of cleansing our soul and opening our soul to perhaps what other type of inspiration can come. Salawat. Step number 2 is that Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam has also attempted to explain what we should feel when we are attempting to seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has attempted to explain it. And this is from Sermon 87 of Nahjul Balagha. To make 2 points before, I only quote a few lines because it is a relatively long sermon. This sermon, and I know it's an obvious point, but was given in public. It's a khutbah. So Imam Ali did not have an issue of making these hidden secrets of spirituality public. I did say in the last 2 lectures that I quoted from Ilmul Irfan, yes, the science of mysticism which you study in the Hawza. This is a very, very like a closed off science in that way. I mean, yes, we study it, but if you want to reach these very high levels, you study under, spiritual teachers, you study under an arif, you study under one who knows, who has undertaken the sayr wa suluk. You have to then go on into dhikr sessions, you have to kind of practice fasting. There's a very, very disciplined way that you attain this level of spirituality. But my readings of Ali ibn Talib Islam is okay, there were deeper levels of spirituality, but he didn't have an issue of making the secrets of spirituality public, because otherwise the sermon doesn't make sense. Number 2 is we have had commentaries on this sermon by Ibn Abi al-Hadid, the very famous commentator of Nahjul Balagha. When he commentates on this sermon, he has said that it is arguably one of the greatest sermons of spirituality in the Islamic tradition. So you can go at home and read it. If ever you want to find out, well, how do I become spiritual, this is also a good place to start. I'll only do a few lines, okay? He has said, Ibadallah, servants of Allah. Inna min ahabbi ibadillahi ilayhi abdan a'anahu Allahu ala nafsi. Servants of Allah. He has said, the most beloved servants of Allah. I'll stop there, I'll give you the answer. Who do you think is the most beloved servant of Allah? Who? Who is the most beloved servant of Allah? Sorry? Okay, you're saying prophets, you are saying some imams perhaps, I don't know. Who is the most beloved servant of Allah? He says, a very interesting answer. He says, A'adahu Allahu ala nafsi. He says, the one who Allah has given power to himself over his nafs. That is the most beloved servant of Allah. If we can control the desires in our soul and those bad habits that we have, that's the most beloved servant of Allah. See, it makes sense to, inshallah, what I said about the Prophet. Prophet at the time of revelation had to have control over his soul. It's not that, okay, Prophet is just nominated without the Prophet doing anything and any effort. Prophet controls himself and is given this revelation. So Imam Ali is saying, if we too control our souls, we are the most beloved servant of Allah. Every Ramadan, that is always my goal. Always my goal. And every day, but especially Ramadan. That, can I control my soul that if there is ghibat happening, and I do try, very honestly, those of you that know me, I do say, look, I'm trying not to backbite, or I say, look, I'm trying to say something in a very balanced way, because I'm trying to be attentive to myself. If people are backbiting, doesn't mean we have to do it, right? If we are losing our temper, that doesn't mean, okay, we're going to lose our temper forever. Let us try to take stock. Is there a way that I can control myself, right? This is what the Prophet and Ali ibn Talib would have loved for us. If Ali was here today, and of course we're commemorating his martyrdom, I am saying this sermon as if Ali is alive. What would Ali say to us? Well, he would say this. He would say, control our soul. Now you may ask, well, how do we do this? Imam Ali does give an answer, and this is his answer. He says, فَاسْتَشْعَرَ الْخُزَنْ وَتَجَلْبَبَ الْخَوْفَ فَزَهْرَ مِصْبَاحُ الْخُدَى فِي قَلْبِ. Imam Ali says that if you want to control your soul, how do we do it? He says that our inner side should be submerged in grief. We should have a grieving heart over our desires and our passions. Inside, we should be crying as to what we have done in our life and what we may continually do. Then he says, we should cover ourselves with fear. Fear as to what bad we may do in order to protect ourselves from that bad action that we could do. So have this very kind of observant mentality of ourselves. If we do that, if we can do that, being attentive to ourselves, what happens? You might say, well, we can never feel that light that Rasulullah felt. Really? Look at his next answer. He says, if we do this, فَزَهْرَ مِصْبَاحُ الْهُدَى فِي قَلْبِي, the lamp of guidance is burning in his heart. We too can receive Misbahul Huda, lamp of guidance in our hearts. Just as Prophet received guidance at his level of his soul, because he reached a very high level, well, based on our level, we can receive guidance. Can we not say to our children, talk to Allah? Can we not say, talk to the angels? Can we not tell them, call out to Allah and have a conversation with Him? Why not? Why can't we say these things to them? Why can't we say, go into the corner and start speaking? Because isn't this what the Prophet did? See, maybe we're not used to that culture. I don't know. Maybe we don't know how to train that. Maybe we're not used to that. But that's only because, as I said in the first point, we looked at the seerah of Rasulullah in a way that did not ask those sensitive questions which I asked at the start, which maybe you were hesitant to answer, I don't know. We didn't ask those sensitive questions. When we ask the sensitive questions, and then you see the Islamic tradition coming together very nicely, with Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam being that mufassir of Rasulullah, is now explaining to us how the guidance came. Salawat. And the last one or two lines before the Maktab. He says that the person who does this, and just because of time, I'll do it in English, he has said that that person is preparing for the day that is to come. And that is day of judgment. We say Yawmul Qiyamah, day of resurrection, also meaning Yawmul Hisab, the day of accountability or accounting. Yes? And then he says that this person regards what is distant, like the day of judgment, to be near to him, and anything that is near to him to be far away from him. That means in these nights of A'mal, the first maybe thought in ourselves is, maybe death could befall us. Look at the people of Gaza. We look at our life. We're sitting here in comfort. Inshallah, delicious iftar that will come, full of comfort. People of Gaza are dying and oppressed. What do you think is on their minds in the nights of Ramadan? Let us put ourselves in their shoes. Death is at the foremost thought in their minds. Death. Forget all of these other things that we are discussing. Imam Ali says the same thing. Death should be the first thought in our minds. If this a'mal or these breaths are going to be the last breaths, how would we conduct ourselves in front of Allah in these nights? And two, whatever troubles we have, Imam Ali says, look, regard them as far away. What is near to us, it says what is near, the actual Arabic is very beautiful. He says, وَحَوَّنَ الشَّدِيد, he says. وَحَوَّنَ الشَّدِيد means you make light of the difficulties. Very difficult thing to do, I think. Whatever difficulties we have, we make light of it. Because ultimately, we could pass away. And so, I conclude humbly by saying that these rituals, these ibadah, these spiritualities, these are simply outer forms for the inner journey that you and I have, which is absolutely personal to us. Absolutely personal. That's why I said yesterday that you do what is necessary for you. in your a'mal, and I do what I do, no problem. Because that is the seerah, and in my dead conclusion, the beloved sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.